Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Writing Life. I'm Stephen W. Long. My guest this week is Gina Fluharty, and I got to say this is going to be fun. We've got just a lot of ground to cover. And Gina, I think you don't know this, but we've met before. Is that a surprise to you? A little bit?
We have.
Okay. And do you know where?
No.
Okay. It was at, not this year, but last year's Terroir Creative Writing Festival.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And to say that we met is a little bit of a stretch. I was in the audience.
Okay.
But you guys being Rose City romance writers?
Yes.
Okay, made a presentation.
Yes.
And now, maybe even then, but you are the president?
I am now the president. At that time, I was the secretary.
Okay.
So I was voted from secretary to president, and I'm finishing out my second year.
Okay. So one of the many things that I wanted to ask you, I'm in a writing group, and I assume that Rose City Romance Writers is what we would call a writing group.
Correct.
Okay. But there's different kinds. My writing group is a critique group. I know that there are groups who are focused on promotion or support or whatever. What do you guys do?
So Rose City Romance Writers meets the second Saturday of every month at Portland Community College, the Sylvan campus.
Okay.
And basically we get together. If there's a board meeting, that'll start at 9 o'clock, but the general meeting always starts at 10. So there's an hour of, general business, the minutes from the previous meeting, all of the different officers have kind of their stage time. We welcome guests, we talk about programming, and then once that general meeting is done, we take a quick break, and then we always have a presentation. And the presentation is either a member of Rose City Romance Writers who has a class to teach, or we bring in outside talent, and we try to focus on either craft, marketing, or business.
Okay,
so
great.
That way, once a month, you're constantly getting something out of Rose City Romance Writers.
Yeah, so you guys really cover everything.
We do.
Okay. That's great. And how many members?
We have 120 members currently.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I've seen 4 of you.
Yes.
So I didn't know how big it was. And in fact, what a segue, Shea McLeod.
Shea, yes.
Yeah, was a guest a few weeks ago.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Okay, so I want to read something. I've been checking up on you.
Yeah, I know. You did this to me at Terroir.
Yeah, and I did, didn't I? So this is, I'm just going to quote some from Goodreads. This is about your novel, Banshee's Bite. And
This is all new information because I refuse to go into Goodreads.
Well, too bad. I did it for you. So Gina Fluharty's debut novel is an absolute winner. Portland, a city that embraces weirdness, is a perfect setting for this paranormal love story, and the preternatural world Fluharty delivers is filled with a pantheon of diversely engaging characters. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
If you're going to read one, that would be one to read.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this book.
So I took a ghost tour into the Shanghai tunnels a couple years ago.
Okay.
And just being underneath the city just really got me thinking of, because it was for secrecy, it was for freight transport, it was for different things, and I thought, well, how would preternatural creatures basically hide themselves and yet still feel that they had a community to go to, that they had a sense of belonging, and they didn't have to worry about humans. And that became underground. So my preternatural creatures built a city beneath the Shanghai tunnels of downtown Portland.
Okay.
And that's where they go to let their freak flag fly.
So this is a romance.
Yes.
Okay. But it's more than that.
Yes.
Okay. I want to go back just to your group for just a minute. What is is there a prevailing theme, or is it just some aspect of romance?
The prevailing theme is romance, and that's the wonderful thing about romance is there's so many genres and subgenres within it.
Right.
So you can write paranormal, you can write with a high heat level, you can write inspirational, which is usually has a sweet heat level, which is, once they kiss, the door closes, and then
it's all off screen.
It's all off screen.
Right.
This is very on camera, as you might want to say.
I
It's
actually
explicit.
didn't read some of the review, but it led me to believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, this isn't.
Is it the lights or is it?
Is it the lights or is it me?
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about my mom when she introduces me. She's like, "This is my daughter. She writes one-handed books," And it's like, oh, great. Thanks, Mommy.
I can, well, I shouldn't even go there. I'd never heard that term before.
It's a popular term.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, for you, what is your writing schedule? I mean, well, just that. Are you employed and write when you can? Do you? Okay.
I am a full-time buyer, and so I work 40 hours a week, and then I come home and I, run the dogs, have dinner with my husband, and then I lock myself in my office from 6 to 8, 9:30 sometimes.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that this is really an important thing, and one of the reasons that the show exists is I want to talk to people who aspire to be a writer, and I think there probably isn't a greater deterrent than time.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear that. How do you manage that?
You have to make the time.
Yeah.
If this is your dream, if you can't walk away from a story, if you can do anything else and not write a story, then you should go do that.
Right.
But if you have a story that you want to tell, that you want at least, your friends and family to read, or if you have the dream of being published, you have to make the time. So that means you don't get to spend evenings with your spouse or your family. You don't get to go to happy hour. I joined RWA, which is Romance Writers of America, of which Rose City Romance Writers is the local chapter, February of 2012. I'd completed a novel by January 2013, and it's still a roaring garbage fire. It still needs to be cleaned up. This is the second book I wrote, and it was published November 1st, 2016. So it does take time, it does take sacrifice, but it's absolutely doable.
And I've got a lot to ask you, so I don't want to stop here, but really that's in a nutshell, that's the key, I think. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
I had a teacher one time who said, the problem is most people want to have written.
Yes.
They don't want to write, they want to have written.
Yeah.
And then they want the goodies that come with that. They want a tour and so on. I remember reading a fellow, I didn't read it, I'm sorry. We actually attended a book reading and signing here. And somebody had asked him, what would be his best advice for an aspiring writer? And the interesting thing was he's probably 40 and the person in the audience was a young lady, 17, 18 years old. And he said, well, what you ought to do is get a job on a tramp steamer and get off at Singapore and travel the city and then find your way to Shanghai. And then, in other words, what he was saying was you've got to have something to write about, and that's, you've got to have some life, you've got to have some experience. But then you have to write, which is what you've done. I'm kind of using that as a segue because I know you've done some traveling.
I have.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
What do you want to know about, Australia
Well,
or the Marshall
Australia,
Islands?
yeah, sure. Let's start in Australia.
So it's actually kind of a good segue for why I want to write about love. When I was 17, I traveled to Australia for a people-to-people science tour. And I became best friends with a girl that lived in Anchorage, Alaska. And this is way back in the day. No cell phones, no email. So we were pen pals for 3 years. And during those 3 years, I had traveled around to Virginia and California, New Jersey, to see some of those wonderful people that we'd met on the tour. And so I'd tell her all about it. And she wrote to me when I was a junior in college, like just finishing up that year. And she said, I want you to come up here for the summer because you've been to see all these people and they've been to see you, and I'm feeling left out. Pay me $100 a month in rent, get some retail job so we can go hike.
Oh, great.
Yeah, go hike, travel, do a bunch of things. And oh, by the way, would you mind having an affair with my brother because he just got out of a relationship and he's really depressed. And so I wrote her back and I said, rent, $100, check. I'll get a job, check. We'll go hiking, check. I'm not having an affair with your brother. I totally had an affair with her brother. So we fell in love, and it's 22 years later.
Yeah, so it could work out.
Yes, it absolutely can work out.
Good for you. Now, did you get the retail job?
Yeah,
you did all the rest of it as well?
Yeah, I did all of that stuff.
Okay.
Did all that stuff.
So kind of back to what leads up to writing. There are MFA programs There are classes that you can take. Some people don't do that. Some people just write. What was your journey? Is this
Reading.
okay? Well, if you're going to write, you have to read.
Correct.
Okay.
And so then I read Stephen King's On Writing. That was the
Yep.
first craft book I read.
Yep.
And so then from there, I picked up a couple of other craft books. And once I joined Rose City Romance Writers, there were recommendations from them. So I read those craft books. And while you're reading, you're writing
Yeah.
at the same time. But I don't have an MFA. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. I used to be a licensed massage therapist, so I have zero intention of going back to school. I'm done
Okay.
with that. But you don't.
Well, I think that's only one route.
Yeah, it is. But some people do feel intimidated. They feel that they have to have a credential
Right.
before they can actually finish a book, and that's so not true.
I think this is your credential.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you start with the first sentence and you get all the way to the end, that's your credential.
Yeah. I want to encourage folks again to do it. And when you complete a book, it is such an accomplishment.
Oh, and
It's
a
some-
high too.
And it's something that statistically most people never do.
Correct.
And if you can start it and work your way through it and finish it, and finishing is really the key. That's something to be proud of. And then where it goes from there is, to some extent, the luck of the draw.
Yeah, the luck of the draw. It's a very subjective market. I'm unfortunate in the fact that, so I sold my first book, and then I submitted the sequel to this to my editor, and she gave me a hard pass, not even a revise and resubmit. She didn't like it that much. So, and that was the week before I went to Romance Writers of America Nationals, which was the last week of July. So I was a little bit crushed.
Yeah.
But I talked to some friends that I know throughout the country, and lo and behold, the Damon Swade is the guy that I was talking to, and he said, "Oh, who do I know that's doing really well in paranormal erotic right now?" "Oh, that's Kathy Lyons." So he called her on the phone, and he said, "Where are you?" "Oh, great, I'm bringing you Gina." And we were at the Dolphin at Walt Disney World, and he walked me across to the Swan, which was where Kathy was, and I met Kathy Lyons, who's always been a hero of mine, and a new woman, Cindy Dees. Cindy Dees is good friends with the editor at Entangled that I really want, Candy Havens. And Candy Havens actually helped me write this book. I was kind of her side project while this was going on. So it's RWA, Romance Writers, we're a collective. We all want to succeed, and we want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
So all boats are lifted on the rising tide.
Yeah.
There's not one of us that thinks, "Oh my God, Steve, tell me your story because I'm going to steal it and I'm going to write that book and I'm going to
Right.
make $1 million." That's not how we are.
Right.
It's amazing.
I hate to phrase it like this, that it's who you know, but kind of it's
Sometimes
kind
it
of,
is.
or at least it's connections, or
Yes.
at least it's an entree.
Yes.
It's something to get you in there.
Yes.
And we've talked about this on the show a little bit before. The traditional publishing arena has changed with technology and so on. And one of the things is email submissions as opposed to hard copy submissions. So now it's not the least bit unusual if an agent would get 100 or 200 queries a week. So let's say that they get 400 to 800 a month. Well, what do you do with that? They're looking for reasons to decline your submission because not that it might not be good, but they're just overwhelmed.
Correct.
How do you do that? So that's one thing. The other thing is, you talked about it being a sort of a subjective arena, and I, broaden that to all art, or we can bring it back down to literature. But I've read interviews with the guy who turned down Harry Potter. A friend of mine, her agent, turned down Life of Pi.
Ooh.
And again, it's, they did the best they could at the moment. They either didn't see it, or, I've had rejections where an agent said, "I really like this. I don't know how to sell it." And it's a job for them. So.
Yeah, because the publisher is thinking, like, an editor does not have a job unless you have a story.
Right.
Because if there's nothing to publish, there's nothing to do. But they have to think of it as like a business. As much art as it is, it's also a business. It
Yeah.
has to be a saleable
Right.
project or product. So they have to figure out where it's going to go on the shelf. They have to figure out what bookstore they can put it in, whether that's going to be a mass market, so you're going to see that at Target and Walmart, and maybe even Walgreens,
Right.
versus a more limited supply at Barnes & Noble, or is it only going to be digital?
Sure.
It's a business.
Straight to video.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. So anyway, but you fought your way through that.
Yeah.
And again, I think the thing is determination.
Yes. Yeah. This is a long game, not a short con.
Right.
If you're only in it for the immediacy of it, you might as well just go do something else. Because
I've given various presentations, and I generally say, if you're doing it for the money, deliver pizzas.
mm-hmm.
It doesn't take as much time, and you'll make more.
Mm-hmm.
This really isn't about the
And
money.
it's less stressful. Delivering pizza is so much less stressful than trying
Sure.
to write a book.
Yeah. I'm thinking, you were talking about your journey,
Mm-hmm.
and Romance City Writers,
Mhm.
Rose City
Rose
Romance
City.
Writers. I keep coming back to not particularly an editor, but a critiquer. Do
Mhm.
you have somebody you share with?
I do.
Yeah.
It's a matter of trust because I've been in critique groups that have fallen apart. I've heard nightmare horror stories about people that, thought everything was going well and everything was going to jive, and once that person read their work, it just wasn't. It was pretty brutal. So I think the best way to go about finding someone that you want to trust with your book baby is to develop a relationship first, to figure out what writing tastes that other person has versus
Right.
what you have. And if you're curious, just get invited to their house and then go look at their bookshelf, because people don't keep books that they don't want to read.
Part of it's taste, certainly. Part of it is agenda.
Mhm.
So I've been lucky. I've been in several critique groups, but two particularly. And I've been blessed that they've just been terrific. But there are those where somebody will bring their work and they really don't want to critique. They want you to tell them how great they are.
Mhm.
And that's any criticism. They've already determined this is a masterpiece. They don't really want to hear that. I think that there's also the danger of you're really pretty good and they really recognize that, and there's some jealousy involved.
There can be.
So you want to avoid that too.
Mhm.
And you said trust, and it's the same thing, but there's a chemistry in a group or one-on-one that I think you need to be comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, and one of the groups I was in, we had a young lady who was really quite successful, and Patricia Smiley, Patty Smiley. And we would say something. She would bring her work and we would say something. And if she didn't agree with it, and you shouldn't agree with everything because it's your work,
Mhm.
she would say, "That's really a good idea. It's not for this book, but it's really a good idea."
Diplomatic way of putting it.
Yeah, yeah. And so again, I feel like I'm maybe trying to give a little bit of a lesson or advice here. But I think you can get a critique too early.
Yes.
So you talked about your first sentence, I think you, the author, need to know where you're going
Mhm.
and be pretty firm, pretty confident in that before you show it to somebody.
Absolutely.
Because basically a blank piece of paper, there's an infinite number of ways you can go,
Mhm.
and you'll get that feedback, and now what do you do?
Well, on the flip side of that is, what if you've been going in circles and you don't
Okay.
really know where you're going?
Sure.
So sometimes you have to say, I've hit this spot, I don't know where I'm going. I just feel like my characters are lost in the woods and they keep running past the same rock when they're looking for a big tree.
Mhm.
And so that's when you need to give it to somebody and go spitball, get some ideas.
Right.
And when you get the critique back, if it's something that resonates with you as the author, if you read a comment or you get a feeling about what that person is trying to say, if that rings true for you, then that's something that needs to be changed.
Right.
But if you read a comment and you're like, nope, that's not for this book, you just delete
Well,
that
that's
one and
exactly
move
what
on.
I mean. You have to be grounded enough to make that decision.
Mhm.
Because if you really don't know, think, well, maybe I'll try that. Well, that's...
Yeah, you could end up changing your whole book, and maybe
Sure.
that's not the right direction for you to have gone in.
Sure. Okay. Is there any little bit of this that you'd like to read to us? Is that too... I know I'm springing this on you. Is that too much?
I'm happy to read, but can you guide what would
Well,
you...
that's not fair. I shouldn't have asked you to do that.
Yeah, because otherwise I would have had a page mark.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can edit this out. So, kind of one of the first turning points. So, Gigi O'Shea is a cop. She's been a cop all of her life. And all of a sudden, she has an encounter with a ghost, and it awakens her preternatural powers of being a banshee.
Okay. And do we need to know what that is? What is a banshee?
In old Irish folklore, a banshee is a spirit that if you hear it at night, it's a harbinger of death. That if you hear the banshee scream, you know, pretty soon you're going to be kicking the bucket. But that seemed rather specific, and so Gigi has different characteristics that make her a banshee. So she's out of control. She has no idea what she's doing. And my hero is a cleaner. So Murdoch's the guy that everybody knows about and nobody ever wants to meet. Because if you have to meet Murdoch, that means he's going to erase your existence. So...
Slow it down just a little bit. A cleaner, it cleans your history. I don't know what you...
He kills you. He
Okay.
erases your existence.
Okay.
You're gone.
Okay.
So if somebody goes to look for public records, in my head, Murdoch's taken out entire towns of preternatural creatures because they willfully came under human observation.
Okay.
So he's the method of last resort for
Wow.
keeping preternatural society on the down low.
Okay.
So at the start of every chapter, there's a quote from one of my characters, and this one's Murdoch's. If you want to know what someone's truly made of, fight them. The next morning. Why do I get the feeling that we're not out here strictly for our health? What makes you say that? Murdoch didn't need to see Gigi's face to know his suggestion of an early morning run was suspect. He could hear it in her voice. But he couldn't help himself. Sneaking glances at her was becoming a bad habit. Exertion brought a lovely flush to her cheeks. He could practically see the thoughts churning behind her arctic blue eyes. Murdoch snapped his gaze back to the task. She wasn't wrong. They weren't out here for their health. Although running did tend to help him keep his debt in check. He needed to see what she was made of. In order to know her true self, he had to engage her in a battle of body and mind. So he doesn't want to kill her. He's attracted to her, he's drawn to her, so he's trying to help her figure out how she can control her powers. And so there's a series of tests that he puts her through throughout the book.
I love it. Yeah. And honestly, just hearing that little bit, I go back to schooling or how did you get here? Well, clearly you have a sense of words and how to put words together, how to make them clear. And this wasn't my major in school.
Mine
but
either.
But I feel like I've done this for so long. You've done this. I have a friend who was a sculptor and wanted to sculpt something that doesn't exist in reality. And his teacher said, you have to really know, it was a dragon, you have to really know this creature to bring it to life. So I want you to write a little bio about the dragon. Well, the bio turned into a novel.
Oh, wow.
And so now he's both a novelist and a sculptor. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I keep thinking about the folks watching, there are different ways to come to this. As you said, you have to read. We actually rejected somebody in one of our critique groups, a sharp lady, but we asked what she read, and she said, oh, I don't read, I don't have time.
Oh,
Well,
that's the wrong answer.
Yeah, that ain't going to work.
No.
Yeah. So, but anyway, this was lovely, and I
Thank
know
you.
that you could have picked something else.
I wasn't going to pick something like Shelby's Desires.
Right, right, to come to that. So how can folks contact you? Do you have a website?
I do.
Okay.
It's GinaFluharty.com. I'm on Twitter. Twitter's my favorite
Really?
method of social media. It's
Okay.
at Gina Fluharty. And I'm also on Facebook. I have an author page. So find my author page and click like, and then I can keep you updated.
Okay. Great. And speaking of that, what's upcoming?
Upcoming is The Bullet and the Billionaire. I'm currently polishing that work to submit it to a different publisher, Entangled.
Great. And that's the one that you wanted.
Yes.
Great. Good
Yeah.
for you. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you for
showing up
having me.
today.
This is wonderful.
And I don't know if anybody can see this on camera, but your dress is terrific with the skulls.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that shows up. Okay, well, that's it for this time, folks. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to contact me, stephenwlong.com. And I'd love to hear folks suggest either a guest or a topic or something, and that's the way that you can contact me. So we'll see you next time on The Writing Life. Thanks.